Congrats.
Thank you.
We've done it again.
Congrats to you as well.
This is what, our fourth series down.
Fourth series down. We still have not done as many. Yes? Still have not done as many.
We have now.
Okay, done as many new movies. Equal as to the X-Men series?
Because there were 13 movies in X-Men.
And we've done 12
6
other
Gerwig.
movies. 6 Gerwig, 3 Peel, and 3 of these.
And 1 Remember the Name.
Oh, that's true. And 1 Remember the Name. I forgot. I'd already forgotten the name. Okay, you're right. So we're past that. We are fully not an X-Men podcast anymore. As of the dropping of this episode, we're officially no longer just an X-Men podcast. More than half of our content is something other than X-Men, and I think it's important.
We're an X-Men podcast.
Yes.
Even Gerwig feels so long ago now.
Yeah, truly. It's been a lot of film underneath the bridge, if you will.
How did you feel about this series, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels?
Terribly. Yeah, how did you feel about it?
Yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are bad movies in the X-Men franchise. Certainly there were movies that were, like a couple movies in Greta Gerwig that weren't, the most fun to watch. But as far as just, bad, start to finish, poorly conceived, offensive on several levels in each iteration.
Even in 2019, still hugely offensive to large populations of the Earth.
And just not trying hard enough. Just not really, I think what really frustrates me about this, and I think the reason why I wanted to do this initially, and the reason why I had such fond memories of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels was from childhood, is because the premise to me is so good. The premise, it's such a killer premise that it's con people in a contest getting conned by a third con person who they're trying to con. It's just, it's such an elegant setup for hijinks and crazy stuff to happen and everybody pulling one on everybody else. It's really frustrating that all of these movies are so bad. because it's a really good, it's a really fun setup. It's just a very fertile territory for a lot of dramatic and honestly melodramatic, goofy, farcical stuff to happen. Yeah, and I feel none of them really live up to the full. Can you imagine this as a slamming doors farce on a stage, in a single location, similar setup, it's all in the hotel or something. This could be really good with just that basic premise. I think we should do Dirty Rotten Scoundrels 4, more dirty, more rotten, more scoundrels.
The musical, the play.
The play about the making of the musical.
Maybe the musical is really good. I don't know.
It could be, yeah.
The songs didn't exactly lay my world on fire, but maybe it is really good. Yeah. Maybe it's the best of the 4.
Could
it wouldn't shock me.
It wouldn't surprise me. It couldn't possibly be the worst. Well, and then I say that, and then yet...
I kept saying that. Throughout this whole series. I kept saying, well, at least nothing will be worse than this. Yeah, I feel this was a very important lesson we learned as a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm glad we learned it this early in our life.
Yeah.
And I'm glad on a series that was only 3 movies.
For sure.
Even though it felt much longer.
Would you care to articulate what exactly the lesson would be that we learned from this?
I think screening the movies.
Oh, okay.
Because even though the pitch of this series very much fit into the pitch of our podcast. Saying here's one story that's been told across the decades. That's totally the entire thing of this podcast. But then in execution, beyond them being so hugely problematic, which I wasn't aware of, like, it just doesn't even change with the times enough to really justify it, you know?
Yeah, none of them really have anything to say about the time period they're in.
Yeah. If it was problematic, but we had something to say about it, like, that's one thing. I mean, we started with the X-Men, but I think, like, it was really damning that none of us were particularly fans of any of these movies.
Yeah.
Or passionate in any sort of way about any of these movies, which is not to insult, like, our guests. I think we got good episodes out of them. But I think, like, neither of us or any of our guests were like, yeah, we really got to talk about these movies.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I feel like before we do a series going forward, we'll be a little more selective about, like, you know, that we've really have something big to say about whatever it is we're choosing.
Is that right? Is that true for the upcoming series that we will be announcing at the end of this episode?
That's a series we were content doing ourselves by a third party, our listeners.
True. That's true. That's true. For once, dear listener, we have listened to you.
That is true. We've heard the thousands of you clamoring for Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Every day I open the inbox, thousands of emails saying, bedtime story 1964, please.
Man, if people actually have made it this far with us, then we know they're truly dedicated fans. And I think this was a brave move of us so early on in our career. Like, we went with, you know, X-Men, which is a crowd pleaser, even if not many people love them, because they're just like, oh, let's roast these, like, movies that everybody kind of agrees on being, like, kind of weird and from the 2000s, you know, like, and then we're going to say, oh, let's give you some good stuff. We're going to give you the Greta Gerwig, we're going to give you the Jordan Peele. And now we're going to see if you're truly dedicated, if you understand the project. We're going to make you watch this Dirty Rotten Scoundrels series. I apologize.
Yeah, I apologize as well. What was your flop to bop ratio here, Emmett?
Well, I have an initial flop to bop ratio of 2 flop, 1 bop, but a revised flop to bop ratio of 3 flop, 0 bop. So that comes to an aggregate flop to bop ratio of 5 flops to 1 bop out of 6. What was your flop to bop ratio?
It was 3 flops, and I stand by that. Okay, well, no, what was your ranking?
Oh God, this is hard because I think they should all be at 0 place. Like, look, I don't believe in censorship, but Library of Congress, you know what to do.
Critics put out the hit. Well, look, it's easy for me. And I never thought I would say this. It's 3 The Hustle, 2 Bedtime Story, 1 Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. And when I saw a Bedtime Story, I was like, wow, nothing could be worse than this. But I really do think The Hustle is. Like, I was probably at least mildly amused for parts of Bedtime Story, and it also benefited from being the first time I'd ever seen that story. Because I remember, like, being very genuinely pretty into, like, pretty shocked that he pretends to be handicapped, and then very into the twist that the other guy pretends to be the doctor. Like,
oh, yeah.
That was an exciting plot development. And Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, yeah, I think Dirty Rotten Scoundrels is watchable. Maybe not recommendable, but it's the only one of these movies I would say is watchable. It has a certain, like, easy breezy sort of charm. I think Michael Caine has a real heart, like grounds a real heart to that story that none of these other movies managed to do.
I would probably agree with that, but I do think I think it's Dirty Rotten Scoundrels at number 1, The Hustle at like a much. Like, these are all low.
Spacebar
number 2. And then spacebar number 3, Bedtime Story. I just think the fact that Bedtime Story is, like, bad, like, technically as a film, that, like, it looks so bad and, like, looks so cheaply made. And I also think that about The Hustle. I think the only one of them that, like, has, like, the glitz and the, like, at least something of the glamour that would go along with the lifestyle of being that rich is Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Who is your favorite Freddy? Marlon Brando, Steve Martin, or Rebel Wilson?
I think the best casting of this character, if we were just like, here's the play that we know of as like Dirty Rotten Scoundrels per se, and who do you cast in that? I do actually think that maybe Rebel Wilson is like the most interesting and like the closest to that character. She is that, like, you know how Laura was like, oh, that Steve Martin isn't like larger than life enough as Freddy, but she really is like that big the whole time, like, in that like preposterous the whole time. I can't say that I like it, but I don't know if I like the character of Freddy, you know?
Yeah.
Who would you say?
If he contributed 1 ounce of acting to it, it would be Marlon Brando, because he looks the part.
Yeah.
He's the only one who you believe, and that movie also goes more in depth on Freddy than either of the other two do. Hustle does a little bit more than Scoundrels still. You look at Marlon Brando and you believe that he's the guy who all these women are putting it on the line to get with, right?
That's true, yeah.
But Brando just does absolutely nothing in that movie.
Yeah.
So I would have to give it to Martin. I like the arc that Martin has, which is pretty kind of unique in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, where he is so sort of like wide-eyed and small-time and silly at the beginning. Like, he's just a guy who has this sort of like silly little idea that women should pay for men because men get prostate cancer.
Right.
Then he sort of becomes a formidable threat because of Michael Caine's training. Like, I like that about his portrayal. Okay, what about your favorite Jameson? David Niven, Michael Caine, or Anne Hathaway?
I think it's Michael Caine, but it should be David Niven. I think if the script were better for Bedtime Story and like everything were better, I do think David Niven is like the correct person to play that role. And that like he would be awesome doing it. I just don't think like the movie is at his level. The movie isn't fast paced enough to support what he is doing. You know, because he's just like one of those very clever, very witty, like firing off like that like Oscar Wilde style dialogue, like rat-a-tat-tat, you know. Yeah,
I think Niven is the most charming. I think I'm never totally sold on this character. Like, I feel like I still haven't seen the performance that makes it work yet. And with all due respect, I doubt it's John Lithgow either. Yeah. In terms of what I feel the character is missing. Caine has the most heart, but I think that maybe I would give it to Hathaway.
Interesting.
I think that Hathaway has the most sense of danger. Like, Hathaway is the one that is the most the threat. In an interesting way. And Hathaway is also sort of the one who I believe, like, the one who we see her pull off a lot of different cons. Like, she goes through the most great lengths to seduce all of these men. Whereas the other two sort of have just like this one thing they've honed over decades. So I think it is Hathaway. That's probably also helped because the story pulls in Jameson to be like the villain in the third act in a much bigger way in The Hustle than it does in either of the other two. Yeah. Who would you say was your favorite Janet? Shirley Jones, Glenn Headley, or Alex Sharp?
There is not any contest, even a little bit. It's our queen, Glenn Headley. You cannot stress enough how excellent she is in that movie. That's like the reason to watch that movie. If you were gonna say, if there's a reason to watch that movie, she is it.
She's and so the movie knows that.
Yeah, I know the movie knows that, and it gives it to you, like gives her to you, like her scenes, and like plays out her plot to you nice and spins it out for you. There should be more of it, but they do know like how to pace this part of it that they've got with her in it. Yeah, how about for you? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah, wholeheartedly. Glenn Headley. I think Sharp is good. I think something that a lot of actors have discovered is that when you do these female-led movies, they sort of flip the archetypes, I think there's a lot of like fun opportunity for men playing the traditional female archetypes, like the mark to be won.
Yeah.
I think about Chris Pine in Wonder Woman, who's sort of like the runaway performance of that movie as sort of like the damsel in distress character.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, it's Glenn Headley. She's incredible. And she's the best performance in any of these movies.
Yes. Yeah.
First, Glenn Headley. Second, the dude who played the butler in Bedtime Story.
Third, the lady who played the cop in The Hustle.
Yeah. I love that the bit that the cop really wants to kill Freddy makes it to all three.
Yeah, I think that's good. Hand acting makes it into all three.
Oh, that's true.
Major hand acting in all three.
Uh-huh. So let me ask you this.
Okay.
What would your take be for your remake, your 2040 film remake of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels?
Okay.
What's your way into this material?
Okay. All right. So I think you do a deep period reboot. No one's going to be interested in like something set in 2040 in 2040. That's going to be played out. So you'd set like a deep reboot. Say we're going to call it like 1200s.
Wow.
It's going to be like set in like Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire at the time, I believe. And it's going to center on two young like peasant girls who have run off and are disguising themselves as men and pulling scams.
That's cool.
That's my way in. I don't know. Cool. I don't know what else is going on. They're in the big city. There's crazy stuff. They're pulling one over. Of course, eventually they're scamming the Mad King of Constantinople.
Wow.
And, all the crazy, like all the stuff, we'd probably take out the parts that are insensitive to different groups as much as possible. We'd throw in some all new jokes that wouldn't age well.
That's cool. I'd watch it.
What do you think?
I think that what I'm most interested in looking at this story, regardless of the gender any of the characters are, is the relationship between Freddy and Jameson. Mm-hmm. Because, like, the question I ask in all of these movies is, A, why doesn't Jameson just kill Freddy? Mm-hmm. In all three of these movies, he literally has someone saying, I could kill him, there will be no consequences. Please let me kill him. This would solve all of our problems.
Is that just to demonstrate that Jameson has a conscience?
Maybe that's what that's saying. But it is true that like Jameson is in a high position of power that Freddy is threatening.
Right.
And he doesn't take that bait. And then the other question is, once Freddy gets turned loose, why does he come back?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense either, does it?
And it's so weird in all three because they play it like it's been like an hour. Even though I think in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels it's been like a week or like a little bit longer. But in all of them, like he leaves and the next scene he's back.
Yeah.
By the way, something weird I liked about The Hustle, which I didn't mention on that episode, is that they like further simplify the weird socialist tax thing to the point where it's just like it's a ruse to annoy Freddy to the point where he will leave.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's, like, the simplest understanding of that bizarre thing we get in the first movie.
That's true. Because in the first movie, I think David Niven really believes it.
Yeah. So anyway, it would be about them being in love at the end.
Yeah.
It would be about how it's, like, a very lonely thing, pretending to be in love with other people for a living. And they relate to each other on that level, and that's what kind of brings them back. And they engage in this very like showy contest of like who can sleep with someone else the most or the first or whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
So wow. I feel like I don't know if they would be men or women or anything in between, but I think that's how.
That's so cool.
That's what I would key into in this.
Yeah,
it feels like it's there a little bit.
It does, and it feels like that's like a really interesting way to take it too, especially it being like supposedly a sex comedy, I guess, at least in its first iteration.
Right.
And I think that's
gets
something
less
that's like,
sexy every time.
and it really does, and it's like the first one is not sexy, but like
No.
it really is the most sexy of all of them. And it really feels like that's a missed opportunity too, because they're all like using romance to achieve their ends, and they're like, but you never really, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, like, what can I tell you? Hollywood, you're not putting enough sex in your movies. We need more,
Also,
please.
I hope this isn't reductive, but like I thought about this watching the movie. People think Rebel Wilson is hot. Like lots of people would be down for the scam if it was just Rebel Wilson doing it instead of every man she meets being like disgusted by her and her having to pretend
so weird.
that's like her hot sister. Like that stuff is so weird. People would be cool with it just being Rebel Wilson. I mean, these rich dirtbags, I don't know. I can't speak to it, but I'm sure some of them.
Hell yeah. Oh, I was going to say, and perhaps we might end up cutting this, but I was going to ask you, which version of Freddy doing Ruprecht is the most offensive? And which version of Freddy with some sort of disability the most offensive? Because I don't think we really paid enough attention on our last episode to the Ruprecht scene. What was I can't remember
horrifying.
What her name was. Can't remember what her name was. It was something good. It was a good
princess. Name. I feel like for the disability, it's Brando is the most offensive because. With Martin, you see both that he is dedicated to acting the part, like really living in that part. Like you think maybe he even feels a little bit bad for himself, which just brings a little more like heart to that character, even as it's making fun of people. Whereas Brando is like just dumb and defensive.
Yeah.
Ruprecht is hard. Maybe Martin. Maybe that hairstyle is the most offensive of anything in any of these. And also with Martin, it's just like he should have known better.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like he should have known better, and then he leans into it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that like Brando and Rebel Wilson are both like adult comedy stars. And this certainly is not like an adult sophisticated joke, but they're like people we're used to seeing sort of do, like whatever, like risque things. But Steve Martin has like that second career as a family movie star.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, where probably most people in our generation saw him first.
Sure.
So then it feels like especially weird watching him do stuff like that.
Oh, that's fair.
It's like the guy from Apocalypse Now doing that. You're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's true.
But then the guy from Cheaper by the Dozen doing that, you're like, oh no. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh man, I don't have a good answer for this. I just thought, I do think you're probably right that Steve Martin's Ruprecht is the worst. And I feel like that movie also pays the most attention to that character. People
having annoying siblings is a thing already. They don't have to have like some bizarre dungeon goblin disability to drive these people off. Yeah, that's very strange. Yeah, you could just have like, if you need an annoying sibling for hire, like come on over to the Temple family. We will hook you up. We could scare off the folks you need scared off with no problems. We won't have to do any insensitive impersonations. And as we heard from Joan Didion, wasn't funny in the 60s. Wasn't funny in the 60s. Unfortunately, Joan Didion didn't get around to reviewing The Hustle. That is a shame. I would have loved to hear her thoughts. Hey, here's a little question for you, Amit. A little piece of trivia. What's that? We've done 4 movie series so far. Actually, you could include Remember the Name in this. 5 series. What is something they all have in common? What is a unifying factor between every series we've done so far? Is it an actor? No. It is, much like our show, a time. Every series we've covered so far has had a movie released in 2019. Oh, crazy. That's really cool. Dark Phoenix, Little Women, Richard Jewell, Us, and The Hustle. That is really nuts. Well, all 2019 films.
So it's all been a 2019 film festival all along. We've just been out here slowly, subtly building the case that 2019 was the best year in film since 1939. Well, very, very exciting. Should we say what we're doing next?
Is there anything else you want to say about Dirty Rotten Scoundrels?
No, I would say don't watch it. Let it be stricken from the record. I appreciate you for listening to this, and I think there is something to learn from listening to us process all of this in real time.
Yeah.
That is, I hope has at least been amusing.
I hope so too.
Yeah, I hope that we have at least created some joy in the world out of these terrible things. So,
and we hope to have better judgment in the future.
Yes, but not immediately in the future.
Okay, this next series, I would say since we first started talking about this podcast, for every one suggestion we have gotten to do any movie series, we have probably gotten 27 suggestions to do the one we're doing next.
So for the first time, by popular demand.
That is true. On Tuesday, May 25th, Cold Boy Summer begins.
That's right. The Cinema Boys tackle Twilight Saga.
We're doing the Twilight Saga.
Cinema Bums is a production of DKG Podcast. It is created and produced by Wade Lawrence Holloman and me, Emmett Temple. Wade also edits and mixes this podcast. Our theme music is by Zane Holloman, who you can find on Bandcamp, and our show art is by Autumn Beckner. Our social media is managed by Laura Bennett. If you like what you hear, please tell all your friends and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, the two best ways to spread the word about our work. You can also follow us on Instagram at CinemaBums or email us at cinemabumspod@gmail.com. Don't flake on us. We'll be back next week.